good morning, or good whatever time of the day it is for you. It is morning for me. You can see the sun shining in on my face. I have such a lovely sunny office in the mornings. So lovely. I'm seeing tons and tons of you joining in. Let's see, Gladys, Diana, Pamela, Patricia, Lisa, Deanna, Judy, and Aaron. Of course, my buddy Aaron. Anita, Mary, Kimberly. Guess who, Nancy? Okay, I love that name. Gotta show you guys. Guess who, Nancy? Hi, y'all. Well, this morning, as I'm sure many of you have as well, have been seeing the news, of the overnight landfall of Hurricane Milton in Florida. We have friends, several sets of friends right in that path. Good news, they're all okay. But it's just been amazing to watch, and I see a few of you joining in that are in fact in Florida, and your boots on the ground there. It's so remarkable to me just watching in social media a little bit today, the volume of quilt makers that just have huge hearts and just are immediately responsive. So I see quilts, collections and giveaways, and I see husbands that are helping and all these things. And it just makes my heart happy. I'm a long ways away physically, but gosh, I'm glad to be part of a group like that. And Harriet's tuning in. Good morning, first time here. Well, welcome, Harriet. I start this like you all know me already, so I should introduce myself for half a second. I am Susan Smith. My business is Stitched by Susan. I am a machine quilter, chiefly a long arm quilter, but I also quilt a little at my domestic machine as well. That was my roots and where I started machine quilting. So know both of those machines. And my style very much is making family and couch and compassion type quilts. I do custom quilting also. You can see the quilt behind me has more detail on it. And those are fun but occasional type projects for me. So today I wanted to talk a little bit. I entitled the episode, Are We the Right Fit? Because I wanted to tell you a little bit of my story. All this week, each day that I've been coming on, I'm talking about the open enrollment for my freehand quilting masterclass that starts this Saturday. But what brought that to be? That's going to be a bit of tomorrow's story, but what made me the quilter that I am today, and what kind of transformation have I seen that I think this class could provide for you who perhaps want to be a free motion quilter and are not comfortable with it yet. So feel free to type in questions as we go along. Begin them with a QQ, if you will. Then if there's a flood of comments, I can search back and find the questions later. I will definitely make time for them, and I love to read over your comments and interact while we are live too. And I brought a mini little trunk show today because yesterday I was busy quilting. I did 3 little baby quilts. Actually, the last one I finished just like 10 minutes ago before I came on air, and you'll see that in a minute. But they're just good illustrations of the types of quilts I do and kind of my why. So let me give you just a little bit of my story. I was born in Canada, and I grew up in very far northern British Columbia, which is the western side of Canada, kind of in the foothills of the Rockies. And my parents were pioneers, very much a throwback to like our grandparents' time. So we built the road into our original farm. We lived in a log cabin for quite a few of my childhood years. We had no electricity, running water, indoor plumbing, all the things. Oh yeah, outhouse, middle of the night, 40 below, been there, done that, got the t-shirt. Anyway, that was kind of how I grew up. But one of the side effects of that was crafting for my mom, who was a traditional crafter, knitting, crocheting, quilting, embroidering, all the things. It was a very seasonal thing for her. So in the summer, right, there was a ton of things to do. There was the garden, there was the baby calves and the chickens to raise for winter and all those things in the summers. We were so busy. Being so far north, summers were also quite short. We were lucky to see 90 frost-free days in a summer, but also the days were long. So you worked hard and long and fast in those summer months. But in the winter months, where the days were short and there was a lot of dark, and we had propane lights because we didn't have electricity, that was the season for crafting. And though, like I said, my mom did kind of all the handmade traditional crafts, and I learned them alongside her. Yet quilting was kind of the theme that ran through and the one that quite a bit caught my attention. Sewing in general. I sewed a lot of my own clothes, like all the way through high school, that type of thing too. And so quilting was something that we picked up in the winter. Now, quilting looked a little bit different in the 70s and 80s than it looks now, particularly where we lived. We did not have access easily to quilting shops, and certainly I never attended any type of quilt show or festival or anything like that till I was well into my adulthood. So we did not have the new tools like rotary cutters and mats and quilting dedicated rulers. Nothing like that existed in our house, right? We just had our school wooden rulers, and we had cardboard templates. A lot of them my mom had collected over the years, exchanged with her sisters and aunts and mother and all this sort of thing. She had a little, like a student's composition notebook with drawings of quilt patterns. I remember Drunkard's Path being in there, and I would leaf through this book and be fascinated by these penciled drawings of blocks and shapes and some notes. And, the pattern came from Aunt Luella in 1946 or whatever the case may be. Those were our tools. And so we would make cardboard templates from cereal boxes, or the cardboards that pantyhose used to be wrapped around. Oh yeah, my mother had a box full of those just for making these templates. So we trace around them with our ballpoint pen, cut them out, sew them together, learn to sew on a treadle sewing machine, still have that sewing machine to this day. And then hand quilting. So mom was a very excellent hand quilter, and I learned to quilt that way too. And I have a ton of childhood memories, under the big living room frame. She did not have the type that's, narrow and wide and rolls up. She had the type that was a great big frame that the whole quilt stood on legs and took up the whole living room. And then gradually, as you quilted in, it got narrower and narrower, and then you could walk around it again. So that was my childhood memories of quilting, and I loved it. Well, years and years went by. My husband and I married and moved on, and especially when we moved to Washington State, which was in the very early, 2011, I think we moved, or 2012. That was when I first was introduced to quilting as an industry. So in the intervening years, we've raised and homeschooled kids, and I just didn't devote much time to making quilts. I didn't know many people anymore that were quilters. My mom had passed away, so my sister and I do both quilt. But if you've ever hand quilted, you know that it can take a really, really long time to quilt one by yourself. And the style I knew was this, on the frame. And so I seldom started one because it would take me 6 months to finish it. And I didn't have anyone to quilt with. So we've moved to Washington State, and, the wonders of quilt shops and classes that you can go to and take started to open up to me. This was the first time that I was introduced to fabric designers, lines of fabric. I had no idea such a thing existed till I was, in my 40s, like well into adulthood. So this was novel to me, and I just dove. I was like a kid in a candy shop, and I dove in. But the very first class I ever took, and I've not actually taken that many, but the first one I took was machine quilting, because I realized I love piecing quilts. I love making quilts. Only I can't hand quilt them fast enough. I'll be the rest of my life getting enough done for our kids to each have one, right? Want to make more quilts, want to make them faster. So I went to this little machine quilting class that was held locally. The teacher's name was Chris. I remember her to this day. She was very influential, and I don't know if she knows it, but just the doors opening on possibilities is what I remember about that day. We didn't learn a whole ton of techniques. It was quite an introductory level class, but my eyes opened wide at seeing the possibilities of what I could do with this at my sewing machine. And so that's how I began machine quilting initially. And it wasn't a ton later, perhaps a year or 18 months later, that my good friend Mary, who had a very small long arm, I don't even know what brand it was just your very entry level little long arm, she invited me over to quilt a baby quilt and a lap quilt on it one afternoon to play, basically. And I further fell in love with that. Again, the doors opened wider. Oh, the possibilities, right? And is when my eyes really, really lit up, and I knew that's what I wanted to do, like for a living. That's what I wanted to do every day. So long story short, I went hunting for my very first secondhand long arm, and her name was Lucy. The rest is kind of history. I just dove in with both feet. But there were some still further developments that came, and these are kind of what I want to hone in today on and share with you is this. There's been a couple of market transformations or pivots that I can think of in my crafting development that I want to share with you that maybe you've not felt one of them yet, or maybe you have and you can relate. Either way, let me know in the comments. I'd love to know about it. But one of the first ones was after I've gotten my long arm and I start quilting and I realize like I can do this and I can do this well. This is something I love. This is an artistic expression that I love. And this was remarkable for me because I never in my life thought of myself as artistic. I never drew or sketched or painted or I don't even know what to, like a landscape design. I can't think of anything artistic, quote unquote, that I did that I thought of myself as having an artistic bent or creative qualities. But when it comes to this particular medium of quilting with a mechanized needle and thread, already at my sit-down machine, but for sure at my long arm because it went so much faster and was so much more efficient, I just found this spoke to me and this was an expression for me. So that was the first really, really pivotal point. The next one came some years later when I've done a lot of quilts for a lot of people and I start to realize my particular bent is toward the style of quilting I do now, which is edge-to-edge quilting, the same design repeated over a whole quilt, because this is what I see most people creating most quilts for, loved ones to use, right? The one that's hanging behind me on the wall, like absolutely that could be a couch quilt too. But this one, and you've all seen art quilts, right, that are fancier, or even, you know, bed quilts, but someone's invested 50 or 100 hours of custom quilting into them and you feel guilty using them. That's not my particular style. From time to time, I do play around with custom quilting because it's rewarding and fun and is its own kind of expression. But I just began to realize that my particular bent was toward doing these couch quilts, family quilts, and also creating a system that made them work well. So whether it was the design that was continuous and I could remember it and I could quilt it entirely freehand, or whether it was ways to achieve a flat and a square quilt without spending a ton of time trimming up. Like if you followed me for any length of time, you'll know on my Friday Live and Unscripted episodes, I don't square up quilt backs before I load them. And that was a thing that I used to believe a long armer had to do. You had to get this ginormous quilt back and figure out how to fold it in quarters and then square it up all before you load it in order to get a beautiful result for your customer. Well, I have found shortcuts for those sorts of things. So that all plays into my love of finding efficiencies. My mom was like that. I am so like that. That's just who I am. So then this pivotal point of realizing I have artistry in me and I can learn how to quilt pretty things was a pivotal point. And then the next pivotal point was that I could figure out a system to do this efficiently and that I could show others how to do the same thing. So this has been incredibly rewarding to me, and it's kind of what I do now. I teach a lot more than I actually quilt anymore. You know, the old saying, I know you've all heard it, you know, give a man a fish and you feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish and he'll never go hungry again. I feel a bit that way about teaching this idea of edge-to-edge free motion quilting. Absolutely, I could keep quilting for clients, but there's a limit to how many quilts I can quilt for how many clients. However, I can teach hundreds, thousands of quilters to do what I do and show them too that there is a step-by-step way to do this and take some of the mystery and the fears out of that process. So let's buzz through a few thoughts. We'll go through questions first in case there are any questions yet. There's my husband. I know your story and there we go. I know your story and I get to be part of it. So true. That's Mr. Producer, by the way, if you haven't met him before. He does a lot of producing of these shows when I'm at the long arm particularly. Susan Berry, I can't take your class this year. Do you have dates for a class next year and can we be added to a wait list? Yes. As of next week, like after enrollment closes, if you go to my website, the waitlist option will pop up automatically, but also feel free to email me and I can add you to that. I don't have firm dates. Typically, I do it spring and fall. Next April, side note, Dave and I are celebrating our 35th anniversary next year. So we're going on a riverboat cruise in April. So I'm not opening it in April. It'll probably be May. All of that to say. And Diane is asking, what's the pattern name of the beautiful quilt behind you? I should just have this on the screen because someone asks every day. It's The Mountains Are Calling by Janet Nesbitt. That's the pattern. Okay, let's go back to comments that aren't questions for just a jiffy. And then I'm going to do my little mini trunk show for you, and I have some more comments about that. Hellos, hellos. I love that you all are chatting in the chat. This is so great. So great. Brenda, I love watching you. Even my husband has commented on how good and professional your show is. Okay, that's all due to Mr. Producer, by the way. He never watches my quilting or sewing shows. My poor husband does have to watch mine. He has to actually sit in my quilting studio all the time that I do those live and unscripted because he manages, you know, which camera and if any problems happen and what have you. Nancy's asking, do you still have them? I wonder what you mean by that, Nancy. Maybe clarify. I mentioned that I still have the treadle sewing machine, and it still works beautifully, actually. Let's see. Deborah, what a gift you have to have only these few years of machine quilting. You look too young to have that kind of experience. Aw, thanks for that. I do often say, though, it's not, time frame is not the only thing, because I do get asked often, how long have you been machine quilting? I'm not to the 10-year mark yet. That comes early next spring. However, because I dove in with both feet and because fairly shortly I was making a serious hobby and then a small business out of it, I've done a lot of quilts over that period of time. So that kind of does make the difference. However, this is part of my thought process that has developed into my freehand quilting masterclass is there are ways to kind of systematically approach your practice or your, I hesitate to say practice sessions because I don't actually advise just sitting down and practicing for the sake of practice. I advise getting lots of quilts, compassion quilts, those sorts of things, and practicing by quilting on quilts. At any rate, there are ways to approach that experience that pay off dividends faster than just doing more and more and more quilts and hoping that eventually you'll fall into figuring out what works and what doesn't, right? Shelley, love your story. I love my story too, Shelley. Thanks for that. And Erin is posting too to Diane, the mountains are calling by one sister. That is true. Janet Nesbitt is her name. One Sister Design is her shop. But notice that the I in sister is a 1. So I tend to say her name because often people get tripped up over the spelling in that. But if you notice that and type it in correctly, you'll pull her up either way. Debbie McDonald, I love your story. Never did I see myself as artistic. Through your mastery class, advanced subscription, and Beth Ann Nemish, yep, another great teacher, and there are others, I found a sense of creativity. Thank you. And this is such a compliment, Debbie. It really, really is, because that's my goal, is to show you that this is for anyone. I am not remarkable in my artistic skills. You don't have to be a wonderful artist. Beth Ann Nemish happens to be, by the way, but you don't have to be. I know many, many, many free motion quilters that don't consider themselves artists. You know, I hesitate to even say that because I've learned over time that we do all have artistry in us. However, this is something that holds people back. And so I want to tell you my story. I don't have an artistic background either. I have no training. I had no experience in what I would have thought of as artistic skills. And yet, I could find a way to express myself in these repeating edge-to-edge designs. I love this. Debbie, due to your videos, my newly retired husband has taken over my long arm. Okay, I so want to see a picture of this, or better yet, a video. Love it, love it, love it. Debbie, so thankful for your instruction. Debbie is a student that was in the last enrollment and dove in with both feet, and Debbie has just progressed by leaps and bounds in her quilting. Love it, love it, love it. Tracy, I love that you're teaching. I love it too. Tony, congratulations on your anniversary. Thank you. We are quite proud of it ourselves. Taylor, I'm a young and new long arm quilter, and I can't say how inspiring your story is. Thanks so much for sharing it. You're welcome. It's part of what makes it, I think, relatable for you is that I'm quite ordinary. I'm just an ordinary, I was a stay-at-home mom. There's a whole other aspect to this, which I probably won't get into today, but maybe will tomorrow. There's been yet another pivot, which is learning that I can build a successful business out of my skill set too. And this was a process to kind of evaluate what things am I good at. Teaching became one of them. What things am I good at? Talking clearly. How can I translate that into something that can build a business? And that's been part of my story too. Oh, your mom's tablets and her drawings. Yes. Yes. So between my sister and I, we've kind of hung on to all those little things for sure, for sure. Tony, you know what you get when your husband retires? Twice the man and half the money. Love it. Carolyn, good question. Do you recommend sticking to one quilt design until one is comfortable or experiment with different designs? Years and years ago, Angela Walters made a statement that has been repeated many times because it's so true. It's far easier to learn variations on one design than to learn an altogether new one. So I do recommend when you're learning a new one, like even in my masterclass, which has a bunch of designs, I will always recommend that you pick one that you love, work on that one, and do it on a couple of quilts until you kind of get the hang of it. Do you need to wait till you're perfect at it? Absolutely not. But wait until you can comfortably move around in it before you try one that's got altogether different repeating motions. Does that make sense? One of the quilts I'm going to show you will kind of bear that story out. Debbie, I'm a math major and I never thought of myself as artistic until I got into quilting. I just love it. I think a lot of us have those hidden things inside us. I've talked before about, examining yourself for artistic qualities. In my workshop last weekend, I emphasized this. All of us, I think, do have artistry in us. We just don't often think of it that way. So we might be good at hairdressing, at picking just the right color, just the right style, right? For a face shape. That is artistry. We just often think of it as utilitarian. And so I've kind of learned this about myself and to apply it to other people too when it comes to quilting. Okay, I got to show you my quilts and then we'll come back to comments. Okay, here they come. Here is one of the little baby quilts. This is my mini trunk show right here. Oh, look, that shows up really nicely with the window light coming from the side. This is an example of what I call a repeating edge-to-edge design. Can you see that? The same thing. It doesn't stop for seams or blocks or any of that. Same design repeats across the whole quilt. And what I find so rewarding about this is, and about doing it free motion particularly, is that I don't need to spend time figuring out pattern repeats or figuring out the size I want to quilt it at or measuring the edges of my quilt. When I do it freehand, I just load up the quilt on the long arm, or if I was doing it at my sit-down machine, I do some basting, and then I start quilting. And all of those things, like how they repeat, how they nest together, what size my quilting is, that's all done in my head as I'm quilting. And if my quilt has any funky issues like chunky seams or what have you, I can literally adjust my quilting as I go to deal with those issues because I'm quilting from the front of the machine. I can see everything that it's doing. That's one of the things I love about quilting entirely free motion. So that's one design. This is another. I call this one Chrysanthemum, and this one is in the Masterclass. And you honestly can't even really see, when you look at the quilt as a whole, that it is flowers, but this makes the yummiest texture when the quilt is washed and gets a little bit of shrinkage and gets all crinkly and snuggly, because all those petals are kind of the same size, but you can see the flowers in there if I hold still enough, can't you? Sweet little baby quilt with a golden background. Okay, and this one. Okay, this is the funny story. I literally finished this 9 minutes before I came on air. I haven't even trimmed it yet, like it's that hot off the presses. But look how sweet this is. So this is a really simple design, double loops. This one I do talk about in module 1 of the Masterclass. It seems overly simple, and it is, but there are some principles that I teach with this design, and one of those principles is you can take a loopy design, which most of you can quilt already, and I go through a bunch of variations, embellishments, personalizations that you can do with that one design. So this goes back to our topic of a minute ago. You know, is it better to learn new designs or get really comfortable with the one you're in? Well, this is one case for getting comfortable with the one you know. Know how to quilt pretty loops. Know how to move around a quilt top or learn how to do that while quilting something that's not complex. And you can go a long way with just loops. Think about adding between them. I didn't in this one, I doubled the loops up. But think about doing loops and adding in stars or adding in, I don't know, cowboy boots or bear paws or, sprinkling them in. This is how you personalize and build up this repertoire of ideas and things that you can do. So when you get in a frilly little girl's quilt, you can drop, daisies in there. And when you get in a little boy's quilt, maybe it is bear paws or puppy dog paws or baseball bats. But all these things are relatively simple to just add in or dress up a loopy design. And remarkably, I did like 2.5 of these yesterday, and that wasn't my day's work. My day was chiefly working at my computer. I just slipped in these little quilts betwixt and between and finished off the third one this morning. So it's so quick. It's so easy. I just love it. Okay, let's keep reading. Luda, I started quilting in 2020. I never heard the word quilt before. Then I thought there was only a stitch in the ditch to put it together. And 3 years ago, I found the whole quilting world. And I'm sure your horizons opened up. Oh, started in 2010. Gotcha. Harriet, I'm excited to learn more. I haven't spent near as much time. I'm 70 this year and determined to create more things that I feel confident in. I love your confidence. I think this matters. I think, take it from me, you can. Anyone who wants to free motion quilt absolutely can. But I think key is this willingness to dive in there and try. And a little bit of this willingness to almost go back to kindergarten, because when you do start at the very beginning, and this was true of me too, when you do start at the beginning, it's not smooth. It's awkward like a kindergartner's printing. But with some intentional practice, you can quickly get past that into being able to turn out useful quilts. And the more that you do, the better and better and better and better you get. And it moves quickly. Shelley, I love Angela Walters' teaching style as well. You both are so humble and grounded. Aw, thanks. We're ordinary people. Angela is too. So awesome. Sasquatch Kit, we are our parents, and that is a blessing to us all. True. I attribute so many of the good things in my life to my parents. Sharon is saying, I mostly do free motion too, but I notice that my motifs change in size as I progress. Any tips to avoid that? I do have a great tip for that one, actually, Sharon. It's funny how some quilters most often I see quilters get smaller and smaller and tighter as they advance down the quilt. I go the opposite. I move faster and I get bigger and looser as I go down the quilt. Either way, you do want to aim for consistency. What I suggest is you take something. It could be as simple as a piece of paper, but maybe bigger, like maybe your kid's scrapbook paper or something. And when you've quilted your first pass, your first grouping of the design, actually draw some out on that paper and then keep it beside you and refer back to it from time to time. So even when you've rolled up or folded up your quilt and can't see your earliest part, you can refer back to your drawn bit to give you an idea of scale. Luda is from Ukraine. Welcome. I'm so glad you tuned in. Carolyn's asking, when you baste the edge of your quilts while on the long arm, what size stitch do you use? My current machine, which is a Bernina Q24, has a lovely several sizes of basting, and I like the 1/4 inch on that one. But for years and years, my machine didn't have a specific basting stitch, and so I just basted it with my quilting stitch. And I sometimes do that now too, just to save changing back and forth. It honestly doesn't matter. That gets hidden in the binding. Nobody cares. And Sue is asking, what size do you make your baby quilts? It varies, Sue. When I make them, typically, I'm kind of into the whole cloth ones, which are a little less than width of fabric wide and about 50 inches long. These little ones tend to be quite small. They are not my own. They're for my friend Pris. She has a little charitable organization called Wee Ones Quilts, and she provides these quilts to a NICU for preemie babies. So they're quite small, usually about 40 inches square, and they're kind of play mats, but they're intended as comfort for these teeny, teeny, tiny babies that are in the NICU. Harriet, thank you for the affirmation. You are welcome. Luda is saying, I got long arm in 2021 and love free motion and ruler work. No computer. Still need to work on swirls and other rounded designs. Yep. It comes with practice. My number one tip for swirls and rounded things is slow down so that you're in control of your machine as opposed to swinging around the circles, right? Slow down and be in control all the time. That's my number one tip. Okay, we're going to do one more quick search for questions. I think I caught them all as I was scrolling down. So let me tell you just a smidge more about the Masterclass because I didn't really give you the bird's eye view yet today. For one thing, you can head to my website if you want to read about it, if you prefer to read, and there's more details there than I can include this morning. But you can go to signup.stitchedbysusan.com. So there's no commitment by going to that. It's just going to take you to my landing page. There's a description, there's a syllabus of all the things that are in all the modules. And there's at the bottom, there's a lot of frequently asked questions. So I'll touch on a couple of those and give you a little bit of a description of what's in it. But feel free to read on that website for more details. But here's how it goes. All the class material will be opening this Saturday, October 12th. And within each module are theory lessons, so kind of where I'm talking about either tools or tips or what I call the anatomy of a good freehand design. And then there are also demo videos. So I demonstrate every design on high contrast thread fabric at the long arm and at my domestic sewing machine. So threaded through the entire masterclass is this. We talk about some of the theory, principles, tools, then I demonstrate every design, take you through the steps, tell you all my best tips and the pitfalls you might experience at the long arm and at a domestic sewing machine. Now, all of these classes are pre-recorded, so you can watch them whenever you want to. Access opens on the 12th of October, and then it's yours. So you have login information. You can take it absolutely at your own pace. There's about 6 to 7 hours of video instruction in the course, but then there are doodle pages that you can practice the designs along with and get familiar with the thread path. There are photo albums that give you pictures of these designs on actual quilts so you can visualize that. There's some bonus modules about things like case studies of challenging quilts, applying binding at the long arm. There's an ebook on tension and stitch diagnostics, solving problems there, those sorts of things. So that's all included. It's all yours. It all opens on the 12th. In addition, every time I open enrollment, and this is why I kind of do it seasonally, I offer 6 live Zoom sessions with me. So they'll start this time on the 15th of October. And each Tuesday, we alternate morning, evening for me, so that hopefully one of them is good for you, no matter where you are in the world. Each Tuesday, then I'll have a session where I'll talk about some of the things in that week's module, although they're all open to you, but I'll kind of take turns to go through each module and its designs. And then you have an opportunity to ask me questions, to hold up your quilt, to tell me about any problems you're experiencing or any insights you've had, and basically just to share in that community. And you've got access to me for all those 6 weeks. And there's also a private Facebook group for the students. So both with the ones that are in this current class with you, and also there are lots and lots of alumni in there who are very generous with their knowledge as well. So that's very cool. Okay. Scrolling down through the questions, because every time I look up the QQs, it takes me back to the beginning. I think I've seen most of these. Erin has given you guys a clickable link. Great. That's the same place I was sending you to, but it gives you a little more information. Apparently Charlene asked which machine I have, and I didn't see that question, so I'll answer it here too. Diane chimed in. I have a Bernina Q24 with the Q-matic robotics. I do, and there's something that I learned about myself early on is free motion quilting is what I absolutely love. But I also know it's good for us to learn new things. And so about 2 years ago, I started traveling for Bernina, so both to quilt shows and to dealerships to demo at the long arm machines. So I chose to purchase the robotic system so that I could get at least competent in it. It's not my first love, and I'm not your go-to resource for everything having to do with the robotics because I'm just not as experienced there. But I wanted to be competent in that skill as well. And I do honestly really love it. If you love digital work or computerized things, their system certainly is very great. But my absolute love still, always, is the free motion quilting, and particularly the edge to edge, just across a whole quilt top. I can just get right in that zone and thoroughly enjoy that quilting process. Okay, if you guys have any more questions, this is the moment to chime in on them. So a few highlights again that often come up in the frequently asked questions is this class for beginners or do you need to be more advanced? Well, I do start in Module 1 with quite beginning designs. So you absolutely could start it as a beginner. You will probably take more time to travel through it. And I will say, I don't think anybody should try and master all of the designs in a 6-week frame of time while you've got me in the Zoom sessions. You'll drive yourself crazy. There's a lot of quilting designs in the masterclass. So I advise that you work through modules 1 and 2, which are very foundational in terms of foundational shapes and in practice methods and in control of your machine. And then 3, 4, 5, and 6, I'm just feeding you a wealth of designs. So you just pick 1 or 2 that you want to work on, dive into that one, put it on a few quilts, move on to the next module with the rest of us. And then later you can come back because this is yours forever. So when you want a new design, you've got a new style of quilt you're working on, you can go back and pick up another design and start working on that one. Okay, So someone chimed in, Carolyn, who's in Jamaica, and my husband, we're hosting a quilting cruise in January. Jamaica isn't on the list, maybe next time. Little side note, we are hosting this quilting cruise in January. Dave and I are, and Beth Ann Nemish is coming, and Sam Alberts as well, also teaching. So if you want some real immersion into my style of quilting, or Beth Ann's, or Sam's, or all of the above, we have some great deals on rooms right now. Erin will put a link up for that. I know she will. Shelley's asking, what quilting ruler do you use for curves? I don't think there's one right ruler, Shelley. Some of the ones that I have are the So Kind of Wonderful ladies have a matched pair that have a concave and a convex, and I like that pair. And I have the Quilted Pineapples rulers. I really like all of hers as well. So that's great. Debbie, as an alum, how do we access the upcoming Zoom classes? The master class has been the best and I'm still in this learning journey. Debbie, the way it typically works is that the Zoom sessions are offered to this current knot of quilters and the knot that came right before. So it would have been the April 2024 people. I do have to limit it so that I have enough time to help the new knot of quilters, right? So they don't open forever for you, but the masterclass content does. Luda is asking, what do you suggest to have for the class? What supplies? Chiefly, Luda, you'll need something to quilt on. So it could be as simple as yardage, and I give some tips in there for ways to kind of reuse fabric without having to reload every time. But what I most suggest to my students is that they find either quilt tops of their own that need quilting, or find a local guild or organization that does compassion type quilts. They're usually smaller, which is a great thing for practicing on. And there's usually a low expectation. In other words, they're not going to quilters, they're not going to shows. They're really perfect fits for practicing your quilting designs on. And these organizations just want to get them completed, right? So it's a great way to practice. Small quilts, not too demanding. Okay. Pam. So when we do the download, will that show up as a unit? Can I drop onto my iPad and just click when I want to go there? I'm not sure what you're asking, Pam. Maybe try clarifying that. Are you saying to log in for the masterclass? And for that, the answer is yes. You'll have your login information, which is usually your email address and a password, and you can log in on any device. Definitely easier to see on bigger devices than tiny ones. Don't recommend watching it on a phone. Question is, do you attach binding with the long arm? I don't always, but I have, and I certainly can. All you need is a straight edge ruler for that one. And that's Linda. Thanks for sharing your name. Appreciate it, because I didn't know with the numbers. Okay, you guys, how are we doing for time? 9:40. Good. We've been 40 minutes. I think that's going to be it for today. Tomorrow, I may bring another mini trunk show again. We'll see what I can pull together. But I did want to talk a little bit about why I developed the masterclass specifically and sort of what led to that process. That was a few pivots in my own quilting journey too, that again led me to, these are the places I wish I had had help, and how can I be that for someone else? And that's kind of where the masterclass was born from. So we'll talk about that a little bit tomorrow. Hope to see you then, same time, same place. Have a great day.